Hi, my name is Jose Hernandez, and I had a near-death experience in the year 2000. So I was working in Miami Beach. We're running electrical lines Wednesday night. I'll never forget it. It's easy to remember because it was the day before Thanksgiving. And we were running a little late, and we had a lot of work still to do. And we decided that we were going to try to take some shortcuts, and we did that. And it resulted in me getting injured on the job. And it wasn't anything as elaborate as being electrocuted or anything like that. But I broke a bunch of ribs, wound up in an ER. They taped me up. They gave me some painkillers. Painkillers had some anti-inflammatory in it. And I went home. About an hour after I was home, it was really difficult to breathe. And I called up the ER and I said, "Hey guys, I'm really struggling here. I'm thinking, is that normal or whatever?" And the guy said, "No, you're all taped up. Don't worry about it. You can't take a deep breath anyway. It just feels like you can't breathe." So at that time, I was very science-based and math-based. So I embraced that. I said, this guy knows what he's doing. He's a professional. And I took it to heart. So it wasn't like I stopped breathing that night. It was a very slow process. I continued to take these pills, and my breathing was slowly getting worse and worse. Got past New Year's. I'm going to just say an interesting note was I decided on Christmas Day to go visit everyone that I knew, even though I could barely get around. I couldn't understand that at the time. But get past New Year's Eve, comes January 5th. I finally can't take it anymore. I just couldn't breathe at all. So I told my wife at the time, I said, "You got to take me to the hospital. I can't breathe." And they did. She and my son took me to the hospital. It was about 11 at night, and got to the hospital. By the time they triaged and got me ready, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then they decided they were going to admit me. So I had some IVs and some stuff going, and looked at my wife and my son, and I said, "Hey guys, there's no sense you staying here. I'm going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Just go home." A good 40-minute drive. And they left. When they left, the nurse comes into the room and she says to me, "Jose, here's this button. It's right there by your bed. If you need anything, push that button and I'll come right in." Right. So I'm looking at her like, "You really think I'm going to push that button?" And I'll never push that button. Right. I'm thinking guy like a guy. Right. Yeah. I'm a tough guy. And she left. And there was a clock right above the door. I kept looking at it and watching that time slowly tick by. And it was really hard to breathe. So what I wanted to do was push the button. What my ego kept telling me, "No, you're a guy. You could tough this out. You're going to be fine. And don't push the button." So that was a bit of a conflict for me. So for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, I was wrestling with that thought of push the button, don't push the button, push the button, don't push the button. Finally couldn't take it anymore and I pushed the button. It's almost 2 a.m. now. And it took about 1 minute for the nurse to get to the room. And that was probably the longest moment of my life. Just felt like forever. When she got there, she opened the door. She just looked at me. She turned to her left and hit the cold blue button. The next thing I know, the room is getting filled with people, crash teams. And I hear the code blue, being announced. The shock of seeing her do it was one thing. The realization that this was happening to me was another. So the first thing I felt, if you can believe, was shame. And people would ask me, "Why were you ashamed?" Well, I had this sheet on me and I was covering myself with it. I'm trying to hang on to this sheet as tight as I can. And they just stripped me down and I was just so helpless that I couldn't hang on to that. And they lift me up, they put me on this board, put this board under me, and they start doing CPR and they start trying to save my life. And the first thought I'm saying is, "Don't worry, you're going to be okay. Just nothing, Don't be afraid." Then I started to think about, what if this was real? I would never see anyone in my family again. And that thought, this was the second thing, made me feel like I was falling. And it was a free fall and a free fall. And I kept falling. And I kept getting lower and lower and lower and desperate, because I realized that if this was real, I would never see anyone from my family again. I would never be able to say goodbye to anybody. And I just kept falling. I couldn't stop that free fall. And I felt this tremendous knot in my chest. It was emotion. And that knot was so strong that it overcame my inability to breathe. So when you can't breathe, you can't take air in and you can't let air out. So it was like nothing. And it made me incredibly, incredibly sad to realize that even if they were able to get in touch with my family, they would never be able to get there in time. So fear set in. I grew up in the South Bronx. I was thought I was a pretty tough kid and stuff like that, but fear set in. I've been a lot of crazy situations in my life, but it's the first time I actually felt this profound fear. At that moment, crazy thing happens. I start thinking about my dad, who had died 5 years before. Now, me and my father were always bucking heads and fighting. He used to drink, and when he drank, he was quite abusive. And he would abuse all of us, but mostly my mom. So when I was about 12 or 13, I decided I had to kind of be her champion or whatever, however you want to look at that. And I used to fight on her behalf. I thought about him and his ways, and his way was, I'm a guy, I'm tough. And not only am I tough, I can't show any fear. Anyway, that feeling of I can't show any fear kind of kicked in, and I remember my body stiffened and I couldn't show any fear. And I wouldn't, and I'll never forget it. The next thing I know, I started thinking about God or creator. I didn't believe in God or creator at the time. I was what you would call an atheist, and I was very math, like I said, science-based. And I thought that was the answer to everything. So I'm thinking I'm going to be turned off like a light switch, and I'm just going to go out, and I'm going to become nothing. And that created a tremendous amount of fear. I started thinking, well, maybe creator is real, maybe God is real. And I started saying, God, if you're real, this is a good time for you to show me. And negotiating, I'm going to be good. I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to change my ways. I'm going to, if you could intervene. I waited about 20 seconds, and those were some really long seconds. Nothing happened. Nothing changed. And I got angry. And then I started saying, what are you doing? It's not real anyway. And at that point, my heart started to get very irregular. So it's really racing. And the next thing I know, it stops. The thing about that is that you hear that in the monitor. So you hear that beep, 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 and then beep. Mentally, that was the most deflating moment of my life. I knew that I was dead, that I was going to die. What happens physically is that I hear the IV drip sound like rain hitting a tin roof. Splash, splash, splash. And then I could see the wallpaper. And I'm about 15 or 20 feet away from the wall, but I could see them. And at the same time, I'm telling myself so I can embrace what's happening. There's no shame in giving up. When I gave myself permission to die, I was looking at the door, frame of the door had been left open. And it was really bright. And I could see like the shadow there. And the minute I said it was okay to die, that shadow moves around everybody and then just touches me. And when that shadow touched me, I just felt this incredible sense of love and peace and calm, and everything was so perfect. Nothing was wrong, and I could breathe. And then there was this warm breeze that was coming, bottom of the bed up, and I could feel it blowing, real warm, and it made me feel so good and safe. The next thing I know, I wind up on the other side of the room, and I'm watching what's going on. First thing I realized, that's me on the bed. And I said, that's me. I also realized that I was dead, and then I said, that's me and I'm dead. But then the magical question, or the changer for me was, when I said, but if that's me, then who am I? And I realized I was so much more than just that body. Then I heard a voice on my left. She said to me, visualize your body as if it was a car. And this car has like 5 million miles on it. We can't fix it anymore. So you got to say goodbye to your body. So I just finished saying goodbye to life. Now I'm being asked to say goodbye to my body. And I look at my body, and I had always been unsatisfied with the way I looked, with the way my body was, with everything about me. I was always so judgmental, and I hated so much about me. But this time when I looked at my body, it was so beautiful. And I started to realize that that body sacrificed itself for me, gave itself up for me, did whatever I asked, even if it could have injured it, and never failed me. And I realized how much I had loved my body and who I had been. Then I started to get these little memories. And you'd think the memories would be these profound moments in your life, like really crossroads type events, right? But it was just the simple everyday moments of every day. Taking a deep breath, looking at my kids' eyes when they were little, holding my little brother's hands, listening to a bird sing. Simple, everyday events of life. And I realized that I had missed life. And so I felt pain by that thought that I had really missed my life. I never saw what life really was about. It's about all these simple moments that we enjoy every day. Those 20, 30 breaths we take in a minute. What we're able to see, feel, hear. It's an amazing journey in life. And that made me really love who I had been and love the body that I had owned. And the voice says to me at that point, we got to keep going. We got to go. And I moved with her. And we kind of walk out of this hospital, and I'm in this place where there's like this big black hole in front of me. And we walk into it, and I fall in, and I feel like this tearing and ripping, and I feel a little discomfort. And then we land, and she said, we got to keep going. And the same thing happens again, and I feel the discomfort. This time, when I land, I'm in the middle of a ball. If you imagine a ball, and I'm right in the center of it, and all around me is color. And that color's moving, and it's beautiful. And it's so, I hear like a million voices, like a chatter. And that's the colors talking to me. Then I hear the voice clearly say to me, what discomfort you felt was all those bad moments in your life, all that negativity can't move in the space with you. It has to be removed. I have to be pure to come into this place. And I understood that. Then I feel color moving And I don't know if it's moving towards me or if I'm moving towards the color. All I know is that eventually I'm absorbed into the color. And what was interesting about it was that I wasn't judged. I was received in such a good way. I'll never forget that feeling. It made me just feel so good to be seen, looked at as something that's equal and just as great as what I'm moving into. Because usually it was the opposite, that I felt being judged and stuff like that. And it just accepted me. And I guess that's a powerful word, acceptance. And it took me in, and I could hear that chatter. And then, if I could call it a mind, because I don't have a body, I was being told how to paint, how to draw, how to do all these things, and how you start, and the whole reason why. And then I move through the colors, I come out on the other side. And when I'm on the other side, first thing I think about is my kids. And I hear the voice say, don't worry, you can see them from here. And that just made me feel so peaceful and calm. I could see this forest right in front of me, and these mountains, beautiful mountains in the background, and herds of animals just running around. It was so beautiful. And that sense of peace, calm, and love. I mean, there's no way to describe it. I'm sure you've heard that before, but it really isn't. Just the only sense that's there is that love and that sense of peace and calm that it creates when you feel loved. Then I saw this big tree in front of me, and I started moving towards it. And I realized that I'm flying, and I said, I'm flying. And the voice said, that's normal here. And I get to the tree, and as I get close to it, I become the tree, and I could feel its heart, and I could feel it feeding itself from the ground, from Mother Earth, and taking its nutrients. And that was such a profound experience, because it allowed me to feel something that I never experienced in life. Then I became the leaf, I became the air, I became the birds. Everything that I got near, I became stones. And I realized that everything had life, even though sometimes it looked like it doesn't. It's made of the same things I was made of. And because of that, it owns a sense of spirit. And that's the only thing we own, that little sense of spirit that we have, that little spark. And I looked up at the mountains, and for some reason, I want to get up there. I can see the snow on the top. And so I move up towards the mountain, and I finally get to the top, and I look to the right. And on the right, I can see the sun. And it looks like it's either setting or rising. It's low on the horizon. And it's really beautiful. And I can feel that warm air coming. And I'm thinking, even there, like, wow, this was giving me this lift. This was allowing me to fly. I could see the flares coming out of it. So imagine looking at the sun through a telescope, and you could see it, the flares coming out of it. And it's so warm, and it's kind of calling me. And I look to the left, and I see this beautiful U-shaped beach, cove. And I look down, and I see a man in the water, like knee deep. And he's got 6 kids on one side in the line and 1 kid on the other. And it's in the water knee deep. And I'm looking, should I go to the sun? Should I go to this man? And I decide I want to go see who this man is. I want to check that out. So I move down, and I finally get to where this man is. I might be 10 or 15 feet in distance away from him. And he turns around. And when he turns around, I realized it was my dad. I also realized that I was going to be able to do here what I'd never been able to do in life, and tell my dad that I love him. We never hugged. That wasn't what men do. So I don't ever remember hugging my dad in life. But I made sure that I was going to do it here. So those were my thoughts. I would hug my dad. I'm going to tell him I love him. And I could hear him in my head, but he wasn't moving his lips. We weren't talking like this. It was just a communication that was happening. And the magic of that experience was that he forgave me to a certain degree, and I forgave him. And when I hugged him, I lived his life in a few seconds. And I realized that he had been proud of me, and how he loved me, and how he cared, and all that stuff, and how he never said any of those words. It went unsaid. And then it got to the point where I was able to forgive myself. And I think that's the most powerful part of that journey, of self-forgiveness that I was allowed to have. And we let go of each other. And I honored my father. And then he looked at me and he says to me, Jose, you got to go back. Not your time. And I'm looking at him like, no way, I'm not leaving here. I like it here. That's in stark contrast to when I was dying. I was so fearful of leaving my family behind. And were they ready? Are they going to be able to survive without me? There were so many fears I had for them. And he says, no, you got to go back. And I feel this pull from here, but really my back. And I wound up back in body. I opened my eyes for a second, and the doctor that's doing CPR, she just leans her head back, and now I'm back with my dad. And we're having this debate. You got to go. No, I don't want to go. You got to go. No, I don't want to go. I said to him. Then he finally looked at me and said, Jose, let's make a deal. The thing about my dad, he was always making deals. So I said, you know what? What's the deal? He looked at me and he said, when your time comes, I promise I'm going to go get you. And when he said that, I was like, the greatest deal that I've ever heard. For some reason, I'm looking at him and I'm saying, wow, that's such a great deal. How could I not take that? And I said, okay. The minute I said, okay, in that second, that pull taking place, and I wound up in my body. First thing that happens when I'm in my body, I get two thoughts. One is, am I such a bad person? Was I such a bad person that I just got kicked out of heaven? And the second thing is, I'm in here. I'm separate from everything all of a sudden. I'm not one. I lost that sense of oneness that I was experiencing over there. And now everything's distinct. Everything's away. I could touch it. I could feel it, but it's not part of me anymore. And that made me feel really down. They had stabilized me. I was intubated. I wound up in hospital for 3 months. And I was able to tell the doctor, ask him a simple question, a cardiologist. And I said, hey, I think I went somewhere. And the guy looked at me and said, no way. Your brain is still alive for 2 minutes after your heart stops. We gave you all these medications. You had DMT. So basically, he said this wasn't real. So him telling me that, and him being a very science-based person, and a part of me still being very science-based, embraced that, and it created a conflict for me. The experience was so spiritual and loving and kind. And what he was saying was it wasn't real. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe something's wrong with my head. So 6 months after I'm home and I can finally walk, I have an oxygen tank, I head out and I start seeing mental health professionals, and I'm trying to see what my issue is. I struggle with the fact that I'm going to see these mental health professionals for all these years and I'm unable to say why I'm going there. I'm talking about a near-death experience, and I'm wondering if that was real. For some reason, I never heard of NDEs or things like that. I thought I was isolated. What just happened to me? And after 3 years, I finally meet someone that's a little open. She looked at me, and believe me, I haven't talked for 3 years. I just sit there and talk about the weather and stuff, and wondering if this is the normal process of mental health. But anyway, I finally get with this forward-thinking mental health professional, and she looked at me and she said, Jose, I'm not supposed to do this. So she sat right next to me, and she took my hand. And when she took my hand, I was right back in that bed, desperately wanting someone to hold my hand because I was so scared. So when she takes my hand, that touch, that simple warmth of her body, took me back to that place. And I was able to share my story with her, the story that I'm sharing with you now. And I had some issues with it. I wasn't sure if it was real. I'm wondering if it was, maybe that doctor was right. And she made that choice for me easy. One day she looked at me and she said, Jose, what do you want to believe? You want to believe that you met your dad and that he's going to come back and get you when your time comes? Or you want to believe you're going to turn into nothing? Which one do you want to believe? That was a no-brainer. She allowed me to embrace the experience, and it didn't happen instantly, but it took a little while. But finally, she introduced me to IANs, and I was able to meet people that had the same experience and shed that concept that I've been the only one that had that experience. Being isolated like that is very scary. And I was able to take that experience, but it's been a blessing. When I died, it's hard to think of dying because when you die, you don't die. What I learned from dying was nothing about dying. I only learned about living, how to live a better life. Look at these moments, these simple moments that we experience every day. Love them. I also learned how magical life is. Being over there on the other side is beautiful. There's no way to describe it, that sense of peace and calm and that love that you feel and that acceptance. But it taught me how magical this world is, just to be able to touch and feel and see all these beautiful things that God or the Creator have made for us. Because Mother Earth is our playground. And look how much beauty it holds. And that's for us. And so it changed my life in a good way. In that way, it made me understand love is free. To have the capacity to do that here, and in particular to have an opportunity to change my life. Everybody has this opportunity every second that's in front of them. And I tell people we're always at that crossroad. At any moment you can make a decision to change your life in a good way. I will say that I do feel very blessed, very honored. I love life, and I'm going to love what comes after this life, this next life that's waiting for me. But while I'm here, my purpose is to make my purpose. And whatever I do, that's my purpose. So my message to everybody out there is make good memories. You're going to take that home with you. Anyway, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you. May you have a blessed day, blessed life. Much peace.